Cool. Just to make the window big.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Better?
Yes.
All right, here you go.
Made the dream work.
Hey everyone, so this is Christian Padilla. Again, like she was saying, I'm the Executive Vice President of the NSCS chapter. We have today Adam Fatka, who is the course director for the 3D modeling department. And then right beside him is Thomas Boldman, who also works alongside him in the 3D modeling department. These two gentlemen were an awesome professor for me when I was coming through their class, and they've taught me a plethora of information. And I just was super excited to be able to get them to do this talk and the topics they want to talk on about AI and technology that's going on right now, and learning about the current industry is absolutely exciting. So I can't wait to hear from them and see what they have to say, and we have plenty of questions for them as well, as I'm sure all of you will. Adam, do you want to take it away, or do you want to start with Thomas?
I mean, I suppose I think you kind of covered me, right? Adam Fatka, course director of model creation. I am before the split in the CAGA program, so I kind of do both of those. Modeling, tech, whatever.
Yeah. My name is Tom Boldman. I'm actually the course director for Project and Portfolio 6 in computer animation. So I'm at the end of the program, but I work with students in the last 4 months of the degree program. My specialty, although it is look development, I dive a lot more into digital compositing and final presentation, video editing, and things like that.
Let's pop up that sound all the way. Yep, there we go. Sweet. Excellent.
Awesome. So Adam, I know that one of the topics that y'all had listed was AI. So where do you think is the most important skill for, current people that are getting into the gaming industry to have as we're going, to have AI be our companion going forward?
Well, I mean, for the most part, I think like most artistic endeavors, AI included, it comes down to the ability to understand the fundamentals, right? Composition doesn't change whether you're doing it by hand or using AI, right? Color theory, all that still plays a role. So unfortunately, with AI, we're kind of shortcutting the process of developing the ability to create, which is good for production, but it kind of gets us ahead of where beginners are developed for being able to identify, right, intellectualize what is good composition, what is good color theory, how to take the elements and use them to push the narrative, to push whatever the goal of the production is. But AI is going to shortcut that, which is nice. But then, of course, we have to kind of take it on our end to study composition, color theory, right, lines, all that kind of stuff to kind of meet where our production quality can be.
Awesome. Thomas, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just to parrot that, this is a big conversation that we have a lot. I'm going to kind of look our side profile folk over there. So a conversation we have a lot with and Christian, you said it probably the best. AI is a companion. It's an assistant. What AI, and there's no industry that's going to escape AI. What it's really good at is assisting the process, right? So I think there's a little bit of a misconception that AI is taking over the process. That's not true. You can push a button, but what your end result is going to be is just someone who pushed a button. So what we double down on, what's most important, is understanding the fundamentals, how to communicate art, right? This is really critical, because let's say someone asks you to use an AI assistant and they need an interior. Well, is it a brutalist interior or is it a minimalist? Is it a mid-century modern, right? So understanding what is it around the area that we're talking about, to be able to communicate and be able to talk, not just for art directors, but also talking to machines and things like that. Like, what is it that you're looking for? What are the taglines? What are the fundamentals? And I'll share an example. We were just meeting with an alumni. He's a creative director, and they do like a fitness app. And they use AI quite heavily, right? AI for some of the animation, mocap, and all of that jazz. And, he showed me the whole process. In about 15 minutes, he had a really cool looking piece. And then I asked him, well, what is it that you're looking for? And he says, the first thing I need whoever's coming in to understand is the 12 principles of animation, right? So the first thing I identified wasn't someone who knew how to use a tool, but someone understood the 12 principles, or a fundamental principle. And I think that, just to pair what Adam was saying, a big conversation we have right now in AI, as far as art is concerned, is being able to communicate and understand what it is we're looking at, and how we can improve on that, and how we can push it to the limit of a final product, as opposed to just, something machine generated that we think is okay.
So when both of you started out in the industry, Did you ever have an idea that AI would be where it is right now? And do you see that eventually fully surpassing us, or do you always think that it'll be some kind of human element that is needed in the art industry, whether that's movies, video games, or the music industry, that will always need to have a hand in there?
So I think that humans are always going to be involved, right? One of the big problems that I think is going to come in production is that people who run the productions don't know what they want, right? So that's where they rely on us as artists. So we have to interpret what they're saying and turn it into, hopefully, what satisfies the expectations of the production. Right. Not only that, but AI can only learn from what currently exists. So they can't come up with things that don't exist, since they have nothing to learn, right? So as the market gets flooded with AI, it will kind of raise the bar, right? The low end is going to be much higher if production value is easier to achieve, but there's going to be a lot more reason to kind of stand out.
So, I want to say about 9-10 months ago, I heard someone was trying to make like a full-on show out of AI, right? And obviously you can't learn from nothing, but still that did kind of scare me a little bit, that can't possibly happen. Do you see that happening at all in the future, where they just...
So, I mean, depending on what you mean by show, like there's always like already like Infinite Seinfeld, which is AI generated Seinfeld episodes, right? But all those build off of existing tropes, existing concepts, right? They're not kind of magically coming up with brand new ideas. So there is room in the conversation for like things that happen to people are pretty typical, right? Like I didn't live a life that's wildly different than my parents or whatever, right? We're all living in a society, but that doesn't necessarily remove the need for humans from the market, right? Not to mention, what does the market look like when all content is completely generated by AI, right? One, nobody's got a job, nobody's going to buy stuff if you can't work. Two, who's going to want to watch the same crap over and over again, right? Like everyone's going to have the same kind of show. There's going to be nothing different. So anybody who's got that creative spark can then turn it into something new and exciting, which would draw attention, eyes, right? Yeah, kind of the same thing like Jackson Pollock, right? People always say like, oh, anybody can make his art.
Yeah.
But when he did it, it was new, it was exciting, right? So if you can do something new and exciting, there's going to be a market for you, right? And there's always going to be a job for somebody that just wants to push buttons too, right? Like AI is not going to come up with the idea to make a show out of nowhere. There's people behind the scenes doing work, right? And AI is not really going to change that. It's going to change what exactly you're doing.
Well, yeah, and to kind of tackle the elephant in the room, will jobs be lost? Initially, probably yes, right? As AI becomes more efficient. However, always bet on innovation. So we look back at history. So he mentioned Jackson Pollock. Jackson Pollock got really, really famous because photography had taken off, right? People took photos. Everybody was like, man, now I want something weird. I want something abstract. So you see this huge run in abstract art, right? But even go back further, you had, if you think about the Hudson River School, right? You have these gorgeous photorealistic paintings, and all of a sudden the cameras show up, right? So cameras, all of a sudden you didn't need necessarily a really, really good painter. You just need someone who's good at cameras.
Well, and when cameras started taking off, the premise was that cameras kill art.
Right.
Well, art just evolved, right? It changed.
Exactly.
So what people are doing, what they're pursuing, just shifts to account for the fact that no longer is photorealism needed in the market.
Yeah, and to that point, how many more photographers are there now than there were painters back then, right? And more importantly, with the introduction of a camera, began the introduction of video, TV, all sorts of industries. So when we think about innovation, we have to think, okay, well, we can't just look at the lens of what we're producing, because the more efficient we get at producing stuff, more industry, more opportunities start to kind of fly out of the window. For instance, one of the biggest issues with AI tackling right now is that AI requires 20%. For AI to be as efficient as possible, where would they want it to go? Would require 20% of the Earth's resources for power. Current computing is at 3%, so it's an impossible task right now. Just technologically, we don't have the power to produce it to the degree that like Terminators would take over the world. But what that presents is a problem that can be solved with a companion like machine learning, right? So we see areas in art and areas in industry where there are problems that could never be solved before are now being able to be solved. So that's where the kind of the innovators, right? Really a big question for for the younger students in the room looking at your career is like, how do I find those pockets and niches of industry that don't exist yet, right? Like during the strike, one of our friends shifted from just like film and TV into influencers, YouTubers, TikTokers. That's an industry that barely existed 10 years ago, right? So again, always bet on that innovation and look for the openings that weren't there before, right? And try to find out how you can take that farther.
Well, and to expand on that, the barrier to entry is going to be lower than ever. Right. If you have an idea for a show, before you'd have to have $1 million and a crew. With AI, you can just kind of do it, you, a couple of people, and get the job done. Right. So we can all start to embrace our craft ourselves, as opposed to hoping that, Walt Disney sees us and hires us. We can just do our own thing and explore our own passions.
Yep.
We do have
So
a question from an online student. I just
Yeah,
cut you off,
exactly.
Christian. I'm
No,
sorry.
you're good. Go for it. Go for it.
How quickly do industries and companies adapt to the ongoing evolution of software and technology?
Slower than I'll tell you this. I have a long background in a lot of parts of the industry. And I worked with a graphic designer, right? That graphic designer was still using an old version of InDesign because that's the only thing they knew how to use. Right. So they were professional InDesigner publication looking people, and they did this. They still work in old software. So I think one of the things, the beauty of Full Sail is we're around a lot of innovative, fast, picked up people. A good percentage of the people I work with, that's not the case, right? And even more so in bigger studios, you've got generational gaps, you've got professional gaps, you have software knowledge gaps, along with the technical stuff like pipelines. Pipelines are extremely expensive, right? That's why, even though maybe Unreal 5 or so is out, a lot of studios are still using like 3 or 3.4 because they have the architecture in place for that, and it costs tens of thousands of dollars to make that change. So as the bigger the company or the bigger the ship, the slower the turn, right? But to Adam's point, the smaller, more individual, like that's faster, right? You can get a small suite, you can get up and running a lot faster. So I think part of that question is how big of a studio are we talking about?
Yeah, if it's just you and your buddies, you can pivot on a dime, right? Because it's about shipping product, making money in theory. Big studios, corporations, right? They are dinosaurs. They will move extremely slowly.
We have 2 questions in the chat box. You want me to read them?
Tom?
Hold on, you had a question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so if you did want to apply to a big studio, how much knowledge of AI do you think you would need?
Would you mind repeating that so that the folks online can hear?
Yeah, you want to repeat that? You're closest.
I was reading.
Oh. The question is, how much AI knowledge do I really need to apply to a position? I would say the best person to answer that would be career dev, because they're the ones closest to the ground as far as the expectations.
Well, and it's going to depend on where you're going.
Yeah,
Right.
as well.
So like if you're working in a specific market that is prone to innovation, then you're probably going to need more. If you're working with something that is much more legacy content, then it's probably not going to be as valuable. Something like marketing, I would say, is usually responsive to emerging technology. But if you're working on like government stuff, then you're not really dealing with AI at all.
Yeah, and I think that's another part of AI that we don't really talk about. And we won't go into this because it's not really part of the discussion. But it's worth researching some of how AI actually works and some of the human toll that it's taken right around the world. So there are sensitive issues, there's privacy issues, there are some other things out there. Why you want it, like in a government agency, fire machine learning, be like, here's all my data, right? You can't do that. So there is some boundaries and some limits to that. You have a chat question?
2 online, right? So one is when it comes to using AI as an assistant, what are some things that are seen as unacceptable outside of plagiarism, obviously? So my initial concern with just AI as an assistant in general has to do with how they train the data model, right? So especially as artists, as of right now, there's a lot of concern with being trained by stealing artist work, right? Stuff that's publicly visible online, they just scrape data and basically build those models, right? If you've used like Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, right? They were trained off of just looking at pictures online, ChatGPT, right? Trained off of publicly available text content. So all of that is effectively stolen. It's not something that the company paid us for. And so even if you don't directly plagiarize, there is a concern of it being plagiarism kind of through the pipeline. Additionally, as of right now, I am under the understanding that AI content is not copyrightable. which is obviously a problem if you want to get paid for it. Right? If Disney makes their next movie using AI, guess what? Everybody can steal it. So that is another concern. So this is going to bring in, basically how much can be AI? How much do we have to actually author as humans in order to make it something that you can legally protect, sell, right? Manipulate, share, all that kind of fun
The
stuff.
Grammys are worrying about that right now too.
Yes. Yeah, it's a lot of
There's
concerns.
been some current news, including the big D.
Yeah, there is the catch that a lot of this is developing and still being kind of sussed out. So like over the next decade, we'll probably see a lot of interesting lawsuits about it.
Yep. And it is very much a gray area. Adobe is probably the safest with Adobe Firefly, because it uses Adobe specific, so Adobe stock and things that they own. So I from the research that I've done, research papers, etc., really the key is you should be using it today. Just get used to it because it's a skill. So even if it is generative AI or just understanding how to talk to ChatGPT, get used to. This is being hopefully this is being recorded, so I hesitate. But if there is a certain level of preparation that is needed to understanding the technology and how it works, right? That doesn't mean you need to do it for every assignment, right? There's certain things that the university has, there's certain things the company has, etc. But you should be able to understand how to make something work using generative AI. Not doing so is hurting yourself in the future, right? Because again, but approach it as an assistant. It isn't going to give you the final result, even though it may look like a final result. It's not really good. Like really take the time to understand the fundamentals. Look into circling back to understand what makes good art, right? If you have a question about that, go back, 100 years. What made good art back then, right? What are the things that have lasted through culture significantly for a long time that can't even just be replicated, right? You look at some of the groundbreaking innovations and pieces of culture that we hold on to today. If you look at Star Wars, for instance, George Lucas created an entire genre. You could have ChatGPT, DALL-E, Midjourney spit out a Star Wars frame, and it could look like the movie. But if you look at the original movies, they weren't necessarily the most technically beautiful, right? But there was something about them that was very, that lasted through culture. And I think that's a big important thing when we look at art in general. Is this something worth viewing, and why is it worth viewing? Right. Yes.
So, I had this question a little bit ago about the adaptation thing, about how people have gaps in softwares and things like that. So I'm used to drawing on a tablet with a screen, right? Better. But the school gave me the one where I have to like write it on the side and look at my screen. So how quickly would I have to go from that to that, to be able to get into the industry?
You would never have to.
Yeah, that's my answer as well.
Really?
Yes. So Wacom tablets, right? I'm assuming you got the Intuos, whatever the latest one is. Right. So that is a staple of digital art and has been for ages. That being said, the iPad is going to give them a run for their money, right? Wacom Cintiq has been around. It's the screen version of that. So the tablet, the Intuos specifically, is a good tool, but realistically, it's not something you have to be able to use. More and more not sculpting artists tend to use things like, let's say, Procreate, right? Is definitely gaining more market share. You got Procreate Streams just came out. So that looks like it's going to be pretty promising. Nomad Sculpt. So there's a lot of applications that kind of bring it in. And then what's it called on Mac? Is it called Sidecar, right? Which lets you use your tablets basically as a screen anyway. And so when it comes to technology, it's more of a how can you get the job done, not can you use this specific thing. The exception to that is big corporations, government stuff specifically. They will use technology that they vetted, right? So they don't just let you bring anything in, right? Especially if you're working on secret stuff. But it's not that much of a psychological leap. If you know how to draw, getting it so you're not looking at your hand when you're doing it is not that hard. But I would say that you could be perfectly successful with never making that transition.
Yeah, and I agree. I think even in it, to bring that into the AI conversation, these are software, hardware, it's all tools, right? So art is art, tools are tools, right? So I think there is maybe some nervousness when we approach software. It's like, well, do I not have it? It's just a tool to learn, right? And that's really when you have to kind of approach it that way. And from experience, here's what I've learned over the, you know, I started actually in live production and then broadcast and then TV, and just part of the lifelong learning talk is, you know, there's a great quote, was basically like, lifelong learning, basically as you learn a new skill, you can rewrite the story of your life or add to it. But it's a lot of just little tiny tools along the way, all of the principles and all the things that you know, when you're drawing, right, you know what you're looking for. And as you adapt and grow as an artist, your eye is changing. And what's nice as artists is you start to understand what you want. And through experience and using all of these tools and software and things like that, all of a sudden you're gonna have this giant tool bag of techniques, right? And some techniques will be AI and whatever's new. Some techniques are the old school stuff. You're like, actually, I know how to do this really, really fast in this old thing. So I'm gonna do it here, piping it over here. I'm gonna pull this tool. So instead of you trying to work for the tool, as you approach new software, learn to make right? Take these little tiny, some of them maybe even sound insignificant, like understanding a couple operations here and there. But those are the little tiny things that you can pull in your tool bag. So when you do approach a situation in the future, you have all of these techniques you can lean on to solve a problem.
We do have some other stuff online, right? One thing that's kind of getting buried is how does Full Sail adapt to ongoing evolution mentioned? I think that was related to AI and technology evolving. I don't know if you want to touch on that.
How does Full Sail adapt?
Yeah.
I mean, I work here, so I think we're hella good at adapting to new technology, the fastest I've ever seen. My coworkers are doing cool stuff that I didn't even know you could do. They're like, hey, look at this new tool. And I'm like, God, there's too many tools to learn. Yeah, in my opinion, I think, I think I think to preface this, I believe that the way that our system is built, these forward terms, makes it a lot easier to pivot on a dime, as opposed to, universities who, may take, or just businesses in general who may take a lot longer to adapt to new technology. That's my opinion, but also I work here, so.
I would split that a little bit. I think on the instructor level, right? The courses, the people who are, right, engaging in their craft, right? Typically passionate about what we're doing, I think. We tend to pivot and adapt to new technology, new techniques pretty quickly. Part of that is due to just being excited about new stuff. Part of it's just being forced to. So like, let's say Maya, right? Getting older licenses is more and more problematic. So in general, we're using the latest one just because that's what we can get. So we use it because it's available. Institutionally, I think the bureaucracy tends to pivot a little bit more slowly. That being said, they don't have to pivot quickly because they're doing money things and accreditation things and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Whereas, it's usually us who are interested in seeing if the technology is viable, trying to figure out how we can use it to actually do the thing we're trying to do. And it's cool. So I like to do cool stuff.
Piggyback with that. Are you gonna have anything incorporated in our actual courses that like teaching us how to right?
That's probably going to be a poor question.
So I actually already have my portfolio, so at least in compositing, I have been getting familiar with Adobe generated by AI, sky replacements, Mac creations, that kind of stuff. So I am always a proponent of give it a shot, right? So see what it can do. Because I think one of the things with AI is if you haven't used it, you think it's this big, majestic beast. But honestly, you find out the more you use it, the more limited you find it to be, right? People who lean too much on ChatGPT never really took the time to realize that if you really put a little bit of effort in it, you can probably write a lot better, right? But for a quick email or like a little social media post, AI is really good right now. I'll preface it this way. This is something I'll talk about a lot. It's really good at replicating the same thing you see every day, right?
Well, that's great for boilerplate.
Like
if you're writing like a letter to somebody and you got to be all fancy and formal, it's really great for you to just kind of word vomit out a little something and be like, make this sound formal. And then you do another pass through it and be like, I would never use that word. Let's change it to this word, right? So it's great at putting together the normal jibber jabber that people use just to try to pretend like we're all nice people. Yeah. But the more specific you get, the weirder things go.
Right. And again, it's really good at being an assistant, right? So being able to replicate, this is why it's so popular in like social media posts right now. Why? Because 90% of them are exactly the same thing, regurgitated over and over again. Why? Because that's what people like. You do this all day long. Maybe not you specifically, but the general populace. So when we come across a piece of AI art and it looks just like everything else, we don't even really think about it. So that's where, as like pioneers in industry, you have to kind of pause and go, what am I looking at right now? Right? Like, why is this pushing the limit, or is it just staying at status quo? And there's nothing wrong with quo, right? Or doing the things, like I said, like Adam had mentioned, doing the things like make this more formal. Grammarly Go is phenomenal at that. It's really good, actually. I actually use Grammarly Go now as like a grammar assistant, because it'll be like, yeah, well, this structure is better. I'm like, you're right.
I always disagree with Grammarly. It
Yeah,
does not speak the way that I speak.
lose, it's win or lose. But yeah, so just getting used to the tool again as an assistant and trying to find the balance of like, what can it do really well.
Well, if you lean on it too much, it's going to strip all your style and voice out of it.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
if you want to sound like everybody else, if you want your stuff to look like everybody else, then probably use it. If you don't, if you want your own spirit to come through, then even if you lean on it, you're going to need to figure out how to put the pieces together to let your unique spirit kind of shine through, whether that's text, images, whatever you're doing.
Good. Yeah. I think there's a lot.
What do you think about students using ChatGPT in their discussion posts? Some, it's very obvious.
It's very obvious.
If your discussion post uses the word therefore, I know you use ChatGPT. If it has version English, I know that you've used ChatGPT or yeah. I mean, if you have this Victorian verbose, I would say this. I think I don't necessarily have a problem. Tom Boldman as a person, not as an instructor, I don't have too much of a problem with it. But I will say, I think if you're just using ChatGPT for everything, you're back to Adam's made a really good point. You're really not doing yourself any favors, right? You're not really pushing it, right? Because the thing is, if your entire business, let's talk about business Mongols now who just their whole business runs on ChatGPT. What happens when the tool goes away? What happens if some legislation
start charging you?
Right, or they start charging, or legislation says, hey, you actually can't use that anymore. Well, you never really took the time to understand what you were doing. You were just having a robot do it for you, right? So it's almost like having an assistant do all the work, and then the assistant leaves, and you're like, oh, how do I balance my checkbook? That's a really old, like, how do I balance whatever it is that businesses do nowadays? I think if you're here in this chat, and if you're here just in general, it's because you're not trying to be status quo, right? You're not just trying to be someone who can push a button. You're trying to bring something unique into the world. And AI can help you do that. But if you rely on that, you're only going to sound like everybody else.
Well, to expand on that, there's also the question about why we're here, right? Why we're at school, specifically the question side of the discussion boards. In theory, we want to learn how to do. If you have a computer do it for you, you're going to get to the end, you'll graduate and be like, I didn't learn anything.
Right.
How can I get a job now? Right. So there's a certain value in engaging in the content. Right. Some classes are really interesting and exciting in theory. Some classes are part of the trajectory, part of the journey, right? We might have an accreditation requirement or something. But engaging in it will, in theory, help change you into the person who knows how to do task. Right. So if you just if you cheat your way through school, you're not gonna learn anything, right? So if you want to do it, if you want to engage in it, if you want to become the kind of person who earns their degree and can then act on that later, engage in the content is going to be an important part of that process.
Sorry, I think it also depends on how you use it, because I sometimes use ChatGPT a lot and I feel like I've learned a lot, because I used to sometimes like, how do I explore something from ZBrush to my
Well, and that goes back to being a tool in your tool belt, right? So if you're using it like that, it's also really good for learning what you don't know about a topic. So if you know you want to study something, you'd be like, what are the top whatever's about this thing? You can get some, and then go do research on what it told you, and then really get some depth out of it. So
even ask it for the research. Like, hey, where did you get this from?
sometimes,
Sometimes it's completely made up,
But yeah, a great tool, not a great thing to just do your jobs for you.
Yeah, exactly.
So just essentially to like put it in short, kind of like a tool in your tool belt. You can screw on a bolt with your hands and it'll be somewhat tight. But if you use like an actual wrench or something, it can be cleaner as long as you know how to use that tool correctly.
Yeah,
But you can't use a wrench for everything.
Yes, that's very much true.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
But if you've never used a wrench, you might just assume that you can use a wrench for everything.
Yeah. Well, and if you're going to learn how to use wrench and you pay somebody to do it the whole time, you're going to get to the end and not know how to do it.
Yeah, that's
So,
true. And then someone hands you a wrench, you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Is there another? There's a lot of.
I mean, yeah, that's sorting through it.
Anybody else in the room have a question on these? Anybody in the back? GPS in the back? Matt, you got it?
And actually, AI generated code lines like the games.
Yes.
I know you guys are talking about like the copyright issues, but code tends to be very like the. So would they be able to like stipulate and regulate that?
So yes, asterisks-ish, right? So algorithms can be copyrighted, right? Like we don't know how Google works. It's all behind the curtains kind of stuff. But individual lines of code are like individual sentences, right? They're not usually enough to, like how much text do you need to actually get a copyright on something, right? If I write one word, two, like where's that? Same thing with code. Excuse me. Usually with programming, it comes down to not the specific syntax, whatever it's the process that it's going through. So with game programming, it's going to depend on how things are implemented. Is it something that is actually unique enough to be copyrighted? If you're just making normal boilerplate games, probably not. If you're making something that's, you're inventing a new thing for the games, then probably.
Quick interjection. Can we repeat the question? Nobody online is able to hear. You're just a little bit too far away from the microphone.
The question was something about copywriting code generated with AI, specifically in the context of video games.
Yeah.
And question mark.
Thank you.
Yes.
And in software, I think even in code, where AI shines is, you ever be working on something, you're like, why isn't there just a button to do? That's where AI has gotten really good. Like, why didn't this always be able to do this, right? So that's where some of the innovation and the efficiency is coming from. Being able to do tasks that took a long time are now a lot faster because it's a task that's been done a million times. Now we have a machine that's like, I've seen this a million times. I can figure this much out. So that's where we're seeing a little bit more of like the efficiency in software, right? Like, why hasn't this always been able to do this, right? It just makes sense. These tedious tasks that nobody wants to really do.
Well, AI is also getting pretty good at doing security tests against your code. So that way you don't have to go there and do it manually. You just be like, how can I make this more secure? And I'll tell you how it can violate your code.
Not yet. Although, on full 3D, so.
Yeah. Cool.
Constant red bars. Can't see it, but.
Well, I'm not scrolling because I'm trying to stick to the question.
Oh, okay,
but there's...
okay. Our question, guys, a little slow on the question.
I gotta read. So there's questions about how long before it's indiscernible what is created by AI versus humans.
That depends on your eye.
Well, yeah, and I would say we're there today, right? My mom can't tell.
Yeah, that's
right. So the better your eye, the more trained your eye, the longer it will be. I find there's sometimes I'll see pictures online and I'm like, this is weird, but it's not obvious at first what's weird about it. And then I'll usually see like the hashtag AI and I'm like, oh, that's why it's AI. There's something off about it that if I stared at it long enough, I could figure it out. But just my gut goes, that's odd. What's broken?
It is starting to feel like it's building a style for itself.
Mhm.
A lot of the pictures look the same.
Yeah. Well, and most emerging technology has that problem where when it's new, it's like, oh, this is so good. But then after, not very long at all, like when Substance Painter came on the scene, it was like, this is so realistic. And now it's like, oh, that looks like Painter. So then the question is, how do you tweak it to get out of AI style? How do you tweak it to get out of Painter style? And that's kind of, any tech has its fingerprints that it leaves on it.
And especially out of the box AI. But yeah, I think over the last few years, it's been fun. It's like watching a kid learn how to draw, right? Like it has
It's not fingers.
Right. Well, it's getting better at fingers. But you see a piece of art and you're like, yeah, that's just not, that's AI, right? Yes.
So you said AI isn't copyrightable yet, right?
As of now, in America, as far as I know.
Right.
That's
all part of a bigger discussion.
because I've also seen pictures online where it's like celebrities and whatever, right? And they look somewhat realistic, but like you kind of tell it's like not right. Why, even though it's not copyrightable, why are they still able to just use people's faces?
So I'm not a lawyer, but I think the answer is they can't. Right. So the catch is, why can I draw Mickey Mouse at home? Because Disney's not going to come and sue me because I'm just some dude with no money. Right. Yeah. So if there's somebody making it off of a serve, right, they might hire a lawyer, whoever the celebrity is, and go and serve cease and desist and chase them down. So realistically, it is probably illegal today. But,
it's the internet.
Yeah, it's the internet. It's hard to, nail everything that's always violating some laws. Some people who are more wealthy are going to be more prone to stamping those out. They always say don't mess with Disney or Star Wars, right? So if you're making Disney art with AI, they're probably going to come and find you, especially if you start making money. But if it's just like some celebrity, they might not even see it. So if they saw it, they could chase it down and pursue legal action. And then of course there's the additional consideration of if they're not in America, the laws might not cover it. Do you think AI will eventually affect social media, like creating pictures and captions to post?
Already has. Yeah,
Agreed.
already is.
Should I be worried? I'm a media and communication student planning on becoming social media manager in the future. Yeah, I agree. It's already there.
Yeah. Most people I know, actually, I just showed my friend's a real estate person. They do a lot of social media. Actually, one of my board members for my nonprofit, same, he does a lot of social media. They're using ChatGPT left and right. So it's worth knowing AI if you're getting into that, because there's like, for instance, most posts like house listings, things like that. A lot of the common things, they've already been done a million times, right? So if it's a repeatable process, AI is probably really good at it, right? But and again, I'm not a social media director. I actually don't use social media, I give up. But I would say for my recommendation would be, just because I've done a lot of creative directing, find the right tools for your client, right? I actually turn down work for clients because they're like, I want all this stuff. I'm like, no, we can do it this way. It's more efficient. Let's just get it done. Right. So I think when you're thinking about social media management, focus less on the tools and like what some of the verbiage is going to be, because most social media posts are the same. Start to really dial in on like your client and making sure that your client's personality, the product's personality, the people that you're working with, that's what people are drawn to, right? Making sure that, and through all of the tools that you're using, that shines through, and being able to communicate that effectively. Right, because there's a time where ChatGPT or AI assisted text, I'll say, because usually it's not just copy paste. AI assisted text will do the job, and there's times where we have to actually use words. And I make sure that you're really good at using, using words. Yeah.
I would expand on that and just say that AI can be good for tailoring your content. So if you've got like something you're trying to push, right, you can use AI to help you target different demographics and make it more specific, and then go through and hopefully nuance it to make sure that your client's personality, whatever their brand is, comes through. But you can use AI to help get all that boilerplate work done, so you're not literally typing everything from scratch, right? You just give it some input text, see what comes out for the different demographics, and then tweak it to make it nice.
Sorry, I know I keep asking a lot of questions, but I assume it's not allowed, but if even something like government officials wanted something written down, like a document, like a summary or something, or a report or something. And you said AI is pretty limited, right?
Well, today, it's getting better.
Yeah, we're talking about today. Yeah.
Right. AI is limited today. Could they do something like that? We're not even talking about legal here. Just could AI even do something like that? And how scary would that be?
Was the question, could AI write summaries of things, or
Like, no, not
Like,
write
could
summaries.
AI take over the world?
Not like, does it pick and choose politics and things like that? Like,
I mean, so AI has an inherent bias.
Yes.
So the bias is always going to come from whatever the training data is. And so one issue that has been coming around is if you type in like for Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, whatever, to give you like a picture of a CEO, it's almost always a middle-aged white guy. Because when you look around in the media, right, it's usually middle-aged white guys. So there's going to be an inherent bias in no matter what the AI model is based off of wherever they got their data. And so that is problematic in general.
And that is a super, super important and highly contested issue with AI. Right. First of all, language, right? So maybe ChatGPT, certain AI works in more languages now, but they are limited by tagging data based on particular languages. But like Adam said, every machine learning just uses a database. Every database will be inherently biased in one way or another. And that is not a new problem. That is a information age problem in general. And that's really kind of very important. And to tackle the social media, I think to kind of go with what Adam was saying, understanding your target audience and what you're trying to say is really important, right? who am I talking to right now is really important in all efforts of communication, right?
Well, and always question what it gives you, right? So
Yeah.
like in the context of the middle-aged white guy CEO,
Mhm.
right? Like, is that something that you want to be a part of your message?
That's
Or
true.
are you trying to bring representation to places that it's not historically, especially by AI today? Right. So everything that AI gives you should be questioned as to whether or not it supports what you're trying to do or detracts from it, right? Question your assumptions on what it gives you, right? How it
Yeah.
looks.
And I think that's a really important point. A couple years ago, I was working. I do work with politicians from time to time, and I had one client who they requested this particular piece of media, and I said I didn't get into art for that. I told them to turn it down. So you have to your voice, you have to know where your boundaries and what you are as a person, right? But fun fact about that, the client that the person they were running up with eventually won, and I met them in person and built the relationship. But they wanted this crazy hit piece, and I was like, I didn't get into art and communication to tear people down. I came in to make people feel better and to make them come to life. So I turned it down, and I think that's a tough, especially if money is an object, which it always is gonna be. I think that's a tough conversation to have sometimes. You have to. You are in it for a reason, and you want to try to stay true to that as much as humanly possible, right? And that's totally different. Some people are like, I love hit pieces, I love the drama, and that's their thing, and that's totally fine. But fine for them, good for them, not for me. But to Adam's point, is that the message you want to put out into the world? Like, yeah, you think, because eventually people are gonna look at it and go, what was that artist thinking, So it's important.
All right, question. Do you guys have any general advice as far as navigating when something changes in the industry? How do you stay in it? Okay, I'll start.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It's really
Yeah,
good.
so there's kind of two pathways here, right? So one is mastery of your current area of expertise, right? There's always room to get better, right? People before technology spent their whole lives drawing and painting, whatever, right? And you can always find additional areas of mastery in whatever niche you find yourself. But it is important to kind of keep your eye open, kind of see what else is going on. When Painter came on the scene, right? Adobe Substance 3D Painter. At first, people were like, oh, it's just a fad, whatever. It's not going to be a big thing. And then all of a sudden it kind of blew up, right? So keeping your ear open is going to be beneficial. And then I would recommend, in addition to mastering your niche, just trying to keep a couple of like irons in the fire in other areas, just in case it happens to become beneficial for you, right? Learning the tools, learning the techniques, right? AI is one of them where when it started kind of taking off, right? Tom, my department chair, Tim, just started dabbling, right? Just see what's going on. And then, through networking, they're like, oh, this is actually getting pretty reasonable. Let's start, and as more people, and it just kind of grows organically. And in theory, that's the way things will go. It's just a matter of not closing those doors, closing that opportunity, right? Making sure that you don't go home and close all your shades and do your own thing and not talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Just staying open to that while also practicing, right? Mastering your own niche.
Yeah, and I agree. I think keeping your eye on the horizon, right? What's ahead? I think one of the killers let me preface this. I think one of the killers for the modern artist is getting stuck in the same routine over and over again, right? Only understanding how to use a particular software to do a particular task. Now, if you're an artisan and you're really dang good at like making swords or something, yeah, like you stick to that way. But I think as modern artists in the industry, we always have an eye on the horizon, like what's coming down the pipe, like because as art transitions as a cultural response to what a cultural need is, right? So as the population changes, our media changes, everything kind of flows in this giant ever-eating like beast that has a business attached to it. So understanding what technology, like, and two is, I think, understanding what technology is favorable to your target audience and what not so much, right? Because there's a million different ways to make a piece of media. And I think to the point that someone made about AI kind of starting to look the same is, if we look at tech trends, the more of something, the less popular it slowly becomes, and then it has to kind of catch up. So that's where that innovation and someone who's really trying to push the boundaries is always kind of looking. They're not getting lost in like the new tool right? They're not, like putting all they're really looking at kind of a broad horizon of how pieces are going together. And one of the best things, personally, I think as artists can do is look at your industries to the left and to the right and make sure you have an idea of what that is, right? So if you're in video games, look at simulation, look at stuff to the left, look at what, some of the educational stuff, education gaming, and look at the culture around the thing you're doing and look for the changes there as well. Because that's going to help kind of level you on the horizon so you're not getting like pigeonholed into these like weird kind of niches that you may or may not want to be in, right? But we want to kind of keep a broad look at the future, I think is a good, that's how I've always done.
Right. And I mean, anymore, game art is folding much more heavily over the film industry as well.
Yeah.
So that's probably going to be coming to be a bigger thing as we move forward.
Yeah.
Right. Mandalorian and virtual volumes and all that kind of fun stuff.
Near real time, yeah, all that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of overlap. Seeing where things are going. Definitely good.
So Adam, what would you say is some information that you would like to pass on to students that you wish you had known when you had started out in the industry, or something you had focused more on when you were first starting out?
I mean, I think it's all going to be cliche, right? It's just a matter of you never stop growing. Like, so when I was young and I started going to school, there's this premise of like, you learn a thing and then you just do that thing until you die, basically. Right. But the process of going to school, the process of learning a craft, it never really goes away, right? Especially as the industry changes, as you get older, there's always going to be a need to develop new skills, develop new tools, and even just kind of play around, right? So most people I know, right, we're artists. You go home and often practice a different art than what you're doing. So there's always going to be something to learn, right? Books to read. Don't ever feel like, well, in my opinion, don't ever feel like there's a finish line, right? It's always a growth process, right? If we wanted to have a finish line, we would probably gone into like business or something, right? There's always new interesting things to get into.
Okay.
I wasn't really asked to you, but I figured.
Yeah, I don't know, but I should have. So I just looked at LinkedIn so long ago. About 12, 13 years ago, I started by painting props for live production. That's how my the industry went. I went from making bread and stuff, I've never bread, into painting. And from there, I've designed broadcast systems, television, done a ton of stuff. And it all came back down to just keep moving forward, right? Right place and right time, I think, is the really important thing that nobody likes to talk about. But just showing half of life is just showing up, right? And now that seems simple, but something I have found in the last more than a decade is just showing up to things has opened up doors of opportunity I didn't even know existed.
The guy who showed up to mow my lawn got the contract.
Boom! In Florida, you know how hard it is to find a stable lawn service?
Yes. 12 years later.
So difficult, right? So a lot of times, I think I'll share this. This is a lesson I learned from Jose, one of our coworkers, Jose, and I think it's a good way to answer the question. Something he taught me years ago. He said, "Don't let someone don't decide for yourself that you're unqualified. Let them make that decision for you." Right. So don't shoot yourself in the foot and not go after opportunity because you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm good. Just go for it, and then if they don't think you're ready, they'll let you know. But just show up, just keep going.
Well, in the context of pursuing opportunity, when they post their, the job posting or whatever, right? Usually that's a wish list, right? That is their perfect candidate. If you check every box, you are overqualified for that job because you're going to have no place to grow, right? So you should always apply when you're shy of the requirements. Obviously, hopefully not too shy, but so that you have room to grow into the position, right? If you check every one of those boxes, they're not going to pay you enough to warrant you being in that job.
Yeah, and to the point of that I was painting a vase when the technical director walked by and he's like, "You're wasting your time and your talent here." Pulled me into live production, and that's where I learned live production and post-production. And then, long story short, I was working on TV and I met a gaffer who'd been 25 years in the industry. He said, "You do a lot in Adobe and stuff like that." He's like, "I think you like computer animation." And then I went to school here and I ended up working for Adam for a time. So it was a long process of just showing up to things for that open up the next door to the next thing to the next thing. And now people around me that show up to things, now I'm helping them open the doors, right? So that's kind of the life, I think, to even to the future of the industry. I think a lot of it is just as artists and people in general is people won't know you're around if you're not around, right? They're like, there's a lot of times I worked with a lot of executive leaders and stuff over the years. Most of the time they're so overwhelmed with stuff, they're literally just looking around for someone who can help them, right? So some of the jobs that you may want or that could change your life could be just being in the room when someone who desperately needed someone like, does anyone here know Unreal? And you're like, you'd be surprised, right? So that's just I would say probably life advice that I picked up that younger me would also appreciate.
Yeah, show up, be friendly.
Show up, be friendly. Yeah.
Did we miss any
So-
questions in the chat? I was trying to.
I don't know.
Okay.
So I got a really good question. So it's one where it says, what do tech companies look for when recruiting nowadays? Is a strong focus on portfolio? Is communication skills the key? Do they just want to see teamwork in previous jobs or in school projects? What's the main thing they're looking for when someone's fresh out of college?
So assuming a visual arts career, in my opinion, the most important thing is your portfolio, right? Proving that you can do the thing that you say you can do. Most people I've talked to who do hiring, they don't even look at the resume if the portfolio is not there. So it's going to be having good work. When I was a student, I was given the advice that, if you only have one good thing, make more good stuff. I found that very frustrating when I was younger. So I was like, if only it was that easy, right? To make a bunch of good. But realistically, let's say make art, show it off. Over time, you will get good just through repetition and practice. And then that is what most people who are hiring for visual arts want to see. Obviously, it's a little different if you get into like marketing and stuff, which does have a visual component. But for games, film, right, you need to make stuff that proves that you can do the task that you're trying to do.
I'll share just on top of that, some really great advice from Alex Hanneman, senior composer for Sony. He had a talk last year with us, and he talks about the T skills, right? So if you're a modeler, look to the left, right, and bottom. What are the skills and disciplines around you that are constantly functioning? So like, for instance, modeling, texturing, and lighting. Most visual artists, lighting, I don't care if it's traditional or CG, lighting is on your T skill chart. You should understand what makes good lighting. For compositors, for instance, it's understanding, or environment modeling, or anybody in engine, understanding what a camera does, right, is so important.
Well, and all that connects to the presentational component, right?
Right.
We're trying to show off your work. If you can't show it off, it's not good. So that's lighting, that's rendering, that's how to manipulate the camera. That's all the stuff that if you're learning, say, modeling, you don't really invest a whole lot of effort in typically. But if you can't show it off well, it is going to dramatically impact the quality of the final piece.
Presentation is, you can have a subpar model presented really well, and you can have you have a really good model not presented well, and most people are going to pick the presentation one that's better, right? Because it shows, to me, I think, let's take Pixar, for instance, is one thing we talk about a lot. Just because something's done rendering, they have a whole team of people to make it look that fine. That last 10-15% that makes it to the movie, though, that's what a lot of people are looking for, right? Can they make something look like a final product, right? So when you are reviewing your portfolios, be thinking about that. And like, does this look like a final thing? For the game artist, Jeff Parrott, I believe he was a guest a long time ago, out of World of Warcraft. He talked about if you are a game artist, right, for instance, and you wanted to get into World of Warcraft, he's like, make your character, take a screenshot from the game and slap it in the middle of the game and see if it works. If it looks like the game, you've done a good job. If not, you have room for improvement. So understanding where you're applying to, what their style and their personality is, and making sure that your work fits into that mold is going to help you out quite a bit.
And for game art specifically, get it in engine. It's got to be an engine.
Yeah, just in general.
So time definitely flies when you're having fun. It's already about to be 1 o'clock, but if there was one thing that each of you would like students to take away from this talk today, or in general, just going forward in their future careers, what would that be from each of you?
You want to go first?
Sure. I was wondering if this question. So I would say for the last year or so where I have been, there's this proverb, when you are at a crossroads, examine the old ways. And when I heard that, someone said it, when I heard it, I said, well, what are the old ways? Right. And that's where I've been for probably a year. I read a ton more. So when we are approaching new industry, new innovation, new world, new whatever it is in your life that's new, when you find yourself at a crossroad, I would say with AI, with visual presentation, getting that first job and just trying to figure out your life along the way, I don't think you'll ever actually get there. You know, what am I doing with my life? I don't know. I'm just winging it every day. But take the time to know, like, look back at the old ways. What used to work and why? Why are some of the things that we have in our lives and that exist still today? Why have they prevailed for 100 years, 200 years? Or why have some things stuck around longer than the new stuff, right? And understanding that, back to the AI conversation, composition, how cameras work, you know, visual presentation, a lot of the old stuff that people were doing back when they were painting on like little plastic cells, like color theory. Why did that stuff work and why was it successful then? Because those are the same fundamentals that are going to last for a long time. And as you approach new situations, having that kind of in your card or in your toolkit, or having that knowledge how to communicate art, that's how you're going to propel yourself forward in the future, right? Is understanding some of the fundamentals that are so important, right? That's the key, I think, personally, but that's my opinion.
So I would pivot a little bit and just go with I came across the saying once, which was if you have more than 3 priorities, you have no priorities. And I think that holds true, especially in the arts, where there's so many shiny, exciting things to distract us. Right? Most of us like video games and movies or whatever. And obviously they come out, I want to play them and I want to see them and I want to do all that, which takes time away from, you know, mastering the craft. So I would say pick what your priorities are and then just dedicate yourself to pursuing that, right? Whether that's, you know, your health or your finances or your arts or whatever things you want, keep a strict focus, make sure to show up for those things, and then everything else can just kind of fall away. Okay. Asterisks within reason, obviously.
Get some people around you who believe in you, and then know things that you don't. Like if you're bad at something, get someone around you that's good at it. That's going to help out a lot.
Yep.
Well, awesome, guys. I definitely really appreciate y'all doing this, and I'm sure all of the students here have benefited greatly from hearing from y'all. And if y'all haven't been through their class already, or if you're about to be or currently in it, then you know, definitely take heed to what these guys are teaching you and what they're saying, because I learned so much from them. And being now in my Portfolio 3 class, I'm you know, referring back to videos that they posted, or you know, things that they taught me when I was in their class to help me out. So definitely make sure to listen to these guys. They definitely know what they're talking about.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks for coming, everybody. That was great.
And don't forget to network with each other here in the room before you go away. Remember, it's the people that you'll remember 10 years from now. You guys will help each other. You'll never be in an industry where you have this many people who are passionate about something all in one place together. So take advantage of that. Yeah, we've got this room for a while. You don't have to leave yet. Awesome.
Online students in the Zoom, if y'all want to share your links or
Yeah, we're gonna leave this run for just a little bit. We're not gonna make you go away. We've got some time
Thanks,
to talk.
Nikki. So definitely reach out to each other, network, connect. Eventually, we might all be working with each other one day in different companies.
And I'm going to, in case anyone's interested in the NSCS in general, I'm actually going to drop my email so that if anyone's interested, you can reach out to me and we can talk about it. All right, guys, I gotta hop off. Christian, thank you for emceeing and thank you for getting our wonderful guests.
Definitely. It's great seeing you, Amber.
Yeah, you as well. I'll see you and Laurel and Mikhail tomorrow.
Thanks,
All right.
Amber. See you.
You said it was a lot of people. Also in retrospect to the end.
Nikki, how many